In a few hours from now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will deliver his speech at the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Prime Minister Modi has arrived in New York from Washington after holding his first bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden in the White House and attending the historic first in-person Quad Summit. In a statement just before leaving for the United States, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that he will conclude his visit with an address at the UN General Assembly, focusing on the global challenges, including the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the need to combat terrorism, developments in the Indo-Pacific. Prime Minister Modi is also expected to draw attention to possible reforms in the United Nations Security Council. Theme for this year's general debate is building resilience through hope to recover from COVID, rebuild sustainably and respond to the needs of the planet. India's permanent representative to the United Nations, T.S. Tirumurti, said on Monday that Prime Minister Modi's speech at the UNGA is one of the most awaited among the world leaders. Now, a total of 109 heads of the governments are addressing the general debate in person, and nearly 60 will deliver speeches through pre-recorded video statements. Last year, the UNGA session was held virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And for more on this now, we are being joined on this broadcast from London by Greg Swenson, political analyst and founding partner at Brigham McAdam. And thank you so much for joining us, sir. Now, Prime Minister Modi, to conclude his visit with a speech at the UNGA, he will, of course, focus on global challenges and reforms at the UNSC. What is your assessment of the same at this point?
Well, I think that, granted, the speech is well anticipated. I mean, given he's the leader of one of the world's largest countries, and the world's largest democracy specifically. And so, look, I expect him to focus on these global issues. I don't think it will be very exciting. I would prefer that he focus and maybe sort of bring some energy to the speech and focus on the threat from the Chinese, focus on the Quad. And I'm not sure, how well the UN will reform itself. I mean, I think that's a noble challenge that he's bringing to the speech. But, I'm not sure that, an organization, a multilateral organization whose Human Rights Council includes Cuba, China, Russia, and Pakistan is going to be reformable. But we'll see.
Right, sir. Now, the theme for this year's general debate is building resilience through hope to recover from COVID, rebuild sustainably and respond to the needs of the planet. What are some of the resolutions we're expecting on that front?
Well, I don't think there'll be any surprises there. I mean, obviously, the COVID and the recovery from the COVID pandemic is on the top of everybody's agenda. But it's, in many places, the recovery is well underway. I think there needs to be some focus on developing countries where recovery is not quite as hasn't been quite as brisk or hasn't come fast enough. But I think those challenges are basically unchanged from prior to the pandemic. The world, especially in places like Africa, where we work, has a huge need for infrastructure. If anything, the pandemic and the lockdown slowed some of the planned development or the necessary development in those places. So look, I think there's a lot of challenges in the world. I hope that they get beyond the COVID pandemic and can rise above the talk about climate change and focus on the things that are a bit more urgent, like getting electricity, housing, food, and medicine to people that need it.
Right. Now, we've seen that a lot that has happened in recent days, the first in-person Quad Summit, the AUKUS deal that ruffled a few feathers. We also know that this is happening in the backdrop of Afghanistan takeover by Taliban, which has been a common denominator in most of the bilaterals and summits that we've seen in recent days. What are some of the, what can we expect on that front?
Yeah, it's a great point that you bring up. And look, the actions of the last few months from the Americans, specifically from the Biden administration, have really been a setback for countries like India. There's no doubt that the disaster in Afghanistan and ceding the country back to the Taliban, hurts India and helps China. It's surely a strategic setback for India and a triumph for the Taliban's chief backer, which is Pakistan. So, you've got both, some strategic movement, and both Pakistan and China are benefiting from the disaster in Afghanistan at the expense of the U.S., the West, and India. So look, I hope that Modi can stress the importance of fighting terrorism, can talk about the Quad, and talk about the unification and addressing the threat both from terrorism and from the CCP. So, look, we expect, again, because of the U.S. pullout, because of the major mistakes by the Biden administration, the terrorist groups will be using Afghanistan as a place to organize.
Right. All right, Mr. Greg Sensen, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.